It's now time for some analysis from our panel. Adam Entous is a staff writer at The New Yorker. Paula Reid is a White House correspondent here at CBS. Michael Morell is a CBS News senior national security contributor and a former acting director of the CIA. He also served as an advisor to Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016. And Rachael Bade covers Congress for the Washington Post. Paula, a lot to unpack. Let's start with the president's attorney, where we just left off there. What stood out to you?
He didn't answer the core question, which is if you thought there was any evidence of wrongdoing, why did you go to Ukraine? Why didn't you go to U.S. law enforcement? The Attorney General has been clear. The president has never asked him to look into anything related to the Bidens in Ukraine. Rudy Giuliani has presented this affidavit. There are other officials who give a differing account. But at the core of this is if you think there's a problem, why wouldn't you go to the FBI? Why wouldn't you go to the Justice Department? Or are you just trying to sow questions and seeds of doubt in the absence of any true evidence?
And in that partial call transcript, the Attorney General is mentioned a few times by the president. But what you're reporting is that there was no actual contact that happened?
Exactly, and I've learned from a person familiar that he was angry. He was surprised that he would be lumped in with Rudy Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani is the president's personal attorney. William Barr is the nation's top law enforcement official, and it raises the question about whether the president thinks those two are one and the same. Now, there is some reason for him to think that. William Barr has been his staunchest defender. The way he handled the Mueller report, very favorable to the president, but now it's up to William Barr going forward to try to allay any of those concerns.
Mike, you know Russia, you know Ukraine, you know what happened at the time. When you hear this sort of retelling of history and what happened during the Biden-Obama years,
Yes.
What are you hearing? What stands out to you? What do we need to know?
What stands out to me is that there is a complete absence of clarity here, right? So there's this image that the vice president acted on his own. No, he was the point man for administration policy, interagency agreement across countries that we needed to pressure Ukraine to get tough on corruption.
He wasn't freelancing.
He was not freelancing. The second is that there's a deep irony here, right? Is that the investigation of Burisma was on hold. And one of the things we were concerned about was that there wasn't enough investigations going on about corruption. Burisma was on hold when Biden was pressuring.
This is the gas company that Hunter Biden ended up on the board.
Exactly. So the irony here is that the vice president, in pressing the prosecutor general to resign, to be fired, right, was actually creating an opportunity for Burisma investigation to reopen, right? So it's the direct opposite of what everybody thinks.
It's confusing to the public, though, as well here. And I know you, Adam, have been digging into Hunter Biden and the work he did do for this gas company. Is there any there?
Well, I think there's two issues. One, should Hunter have taken this position when his father was, vice president, playing a key role in shaping policy towards Ukraine? Should some of Biden's advisors or White House officials or State Department officials have said to Joe Biden or said to Hunter Biden, you know what, you really shouldn't be on this board? That never happened. So I think that's a legitimate question. On the issue of whether Joe Biden used his office in order to have Shokin, this prosecutor, fired, I spent a lot of time looking at this. Much of what I see is the opposite. The oligarch who recruited Hunter to be on this board, when Shokin was the prosecutor, he was in Ukraine. He felt safe, according to former board members. He didn't feel like he had he was in legal jeopardy at all. It was once Shokin was fired and Lutsenko, who was the person who you interviewed here, took over as the prosecutor. That's when the oligarch, Zlochevsky, decided to leave the country. He went to Dubai at that point because that's when he was concerned that he might actually be prosecuted. Mm-hmm. So really when Shokin leaves, that's when the oligarch feels like he's actually in jeopardy.
Rachel, you heard Senator Graham on this program fully defend the president here. This is someone who knows the details of this region, these policies. Are other Republicans standing by the president on this fight?
Yeah, I mean, largely the party is sticking with the president right now. We are seeing little cracks begin to emerge. I will say privately, we hear a lot of griping from lawmakers on the Hill who are wondering why the president put out this transcript to begin with and think that there is something that really is damaging. We have seen a couple of Republicans start to crack. Mitt Romney, for example, came out and said that this was disturbing, sort of unacceptable. We saw Republicans in a hearing last week, Mike Turner from Dayton, Ohio, say that this sort of action, asking a foreign leader to investigate a political adversary that would benefit you, is point blank not okay. But there's a difference between some Republicans, and I can probably count them on one or two hands, who are willing to say that this sort of activity is not acceptable, and actually saying that this is an impeachable offense. We saw a really interesting sort of flip-flop over the weekend with a Republican from Nevada, Mark Amadei. He had been talking to reporters on Friday saying, let's see where this goes. He was asked about the impeachment inquiry, and it seemed like he was supporting it, saying, you know, this is an investigation. There are concerning allegations here. Let's see where it goes. Well, within 24 hours, he totally walked back on that and said, I was never supporting the impeachment investigation. And again, this is just showing that this is a party that sticks with the president, who is very popular with their base.
Mike, the whistleblower, as we've been reporting, came from the intelligence community. And yet you have Republicans saying everything laid out in that complaint was just hearsay. From the work you saw that was then made public, does that look like it's based on just hearsay?
So the whistleblower seems to me to be highly credible. Whistleblower made a number of allegations. We know that the first allegation, that the phone call was made and the ask was made about investigating the vice president, was 100% correct. The whistleblower lays out not just the fact that they received this from one source, but multiple sources. The whistleblower complaint is detailed, it's compelling. We still need to look into the other allegations, but I think the whistleblower is highly credible.
In other words, this looks like an analysis product that an agency would produce.
So when I read it, I said, this is a high quality piece of CIA analysis. This person was well trained, they're highly skilled. I was kind of proud of the product, right, and looking at it. It seemed to me like this was a piece of CIA analysis.
Paula, are White House officials actually nervous, or are they embracing impeachment as the fight they want to have?
Look, the president is not likely to be removed from office. That's just basic math. And so far, this administration has constantly been under this cloud of controversy and scandal. But the real concern is that now this impeachment inquiry and possible articles of impeachment makes it almost impossible to expect any kind of success on the legislative front. They were making some progress getting the president's proposal together for gun control legislation. They were hoping for maybe something on prescription drugs, the USMCA. Now their biggest concern is they may not have much to show when they go on the campaign trail in 2020, particularly a trade deal. The president so far has not been able to get any of his trade deals actually approved. The USMCA was his big hope, and with this, unlikely.
Adam, why aren't we seeing Joe Biden out there, sitting down, actively defending his son and giving detailed explanations for all of this? There's a lot of dirt being kicked up into the air.
I mean, there's a reason why they're focusing on Hunter. This is a really delicate issue for Joe Biden, particularly delicate in the period that we're talking about, because this is right when Beau is very sick and getting, is his last year of life, which is really when Hunter makes this deal to work with Burisma, this Ukrainian company. And historically, aides to Biden just never wanted to address this issue with him. It was too sensitive. Things that involved his family were just considered to be off limits largely to his staff. And I think to a fault, he was reluctant to really say anything to his son, about the appropriateness of some of his business choices. And the way they dealt with it was like a don't ask, don't tell policy, where Hunter wouldn't tell his father about his activities, and Joe Biden wouldn't ask. And so they just had this area that they didn't discuss, and that kind of allowed this thing to sort of stew. And obviously, if this had been addressed early on in 2014, when this became public that he was on this board, we wouldn't be maybe discussing it now.
Rachel, is opening the inquiry ultimately something that could backfire for Democrats because it keeps this story out there?
That was the number one concern Speaker Nancy Pelosi had about impeachment when she opened the new Congress this year. I mean, she has been the single greatest reason why Democrats, who overwhelmingly have favored for impeachment for a while, have not charged forward. But this, Pelosi has said to her colleagues, she said it publicly, this is something different. This is, there were concerns that, for example, Robert Mueller's report about 10 instances of potential obstruction of justice, that wasn't resonating with the public. There were suggestions that even though federal prosecutors named Trump as the #1 individual involved in allegations of well, actually paying off women who alleged affairs with the president in 2016, that wasn't resonating with the public, and the public wasn't supporting impeachment. But we are seeing in some of these CBS numbers just today that that's changing. 55% supporting an impeachment inquiry, more people supporting the impeachment of the president than actually do not. Pelosi, it seems, was right that this was something different and that this is going to move public sentiment potentially continuing in their direction.
Major story we'll continue following.